Welcome back. We're about to begin Apologetics number 2. So in number 1, we looked at some of the foundations of apologetics, why being a thinking and reasoning person is important, the areas of science that we call interpretation, that we call evidence, and what that means and how that can be influenced by our worldview, our understanding of life and reality. And we looked at the results of people interpreting Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 from a naturalistic situation and the changes that has made in society. So welcome aboard, and let's start with, let's carry on from where we were. I'm just going to share the screen and you will see me smaller again, which is still an advantage. And oops, not that one. The joys of Zoom. Okay, so I trust that you can all see that. And just sorry that you can't ask questions along the way, but there are limitations in doing it this way. So we were going to look at those key questions. So let's move on and talk about the Bible. The Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament, I think it's fair to argue that compared to any other religious writings in the world, of the ancient world, is just out on its own as far as reliability is concerned. We'll look at that a little bit later on in more detail. But geologically, the Bible lines up with history. In fact, a lot of people, some scientists anyway, now are returning to a form of catastrophism in their understanding of the rocks. They're recognizing that the sedimentary layers of rocks that we have around the world, about 70% still, I think, be a testimony to the fact that there has been some sort of cataclysmic flood. You don't get rocks, sedimentary rocks with fossils in them laid down just by normal day-to-day experiences. And of course, they don't always want to acknowledge it as the flood of Noah, but they're recognizing it. Archaeologically, we'll have a look at that. Anthropology, the understanding of the history of mankind, particularly in the world and the study of man. The Bible and current history, anthropology, I believe, match pretty well in the fact that mankind, population-wise, was seen to develop in the Middle East initially, in the Fertile Crescent, that area, and then spread around to the different places of the world. Medical science, it's very interesting that a lot of the medical kind of laws in the Old Testament are well ahead of their time as far as medical knowledge goes. Diseases, there's been a book written years ago called None of These Diseases, and it explains how those who followed the principles of the Old Testament just did not get the same diseases that were known around the nations. And one of the reasons was they followed those restrictions in the Old Testament about their hygiene behavior and how to deal with various things. Now, that was before people knew what a virus was, or what a bacterium was, or what a microfungi was. And yet the science is there. And then we've got the question about the universe and the origin of life. So we'll move on to that one at the moment. Now, what does the Bible teach about the beginning of the universe? Well, the Bible most clearly says that God created the universe and life in it in 6 days. And we're assuming that those days are pretty much the same as the length of days that we have. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So that means everything we see up there and everything we see down here, basically. So you could argue it's the sky, yes, but more than that, it's the cosmos, the stars, the sun, the moon, planets, and all the other stuff that's out there. Now, this critical verse, the first verse of the Bible, is important, and a well-known creationist called Dr. Henry Morris made this point. He said, this verse refutes atheism because the universe was created by God. It refutes pantheism. God is transcendent to that which he created. In other words, he's beyond it, over it, above it, but not part of it. It refutes polytheism, for one God created all things, and so not many gods. It refutes materialism, for matter had a beginning. Therefore, matter isn't the ultimate reality. God is. And because if you don't believe in God, matter becomes the ultimate reality. And one of the interesting things that's happened in recent decades is that scientists have pretty much demonstrated scientifically that the universe had a beginning. It hasn't always been there. So matter is not the ultimate reality. There's something beyond matter that's the ultimate reality. It refutes dualism because God was alone when he created. And so there isn't this kind of one sort of God and then there's opposite on the other side, the yin and yang kind of concept of God. But God is alone. There is one God. It refutes humanism because God, not man, is the ultimate reality. And it refutes evolutionism because God created all things. So some useful points there from the Genesis record by Henry Morris. That was a creationist book which convinced a lot of scientists that the evolutionary way of thinking about the world was in fact quite wrong. So we know what the Bible says. The question is, what does naturalistic opinion say about the beginning of the universe? And not the only model, but the most common model and the most talked about model today is the Big Bang, so called. So let's have a look at the Big Bang for a little while. The concept of the Big Bang. Now, a lot of Christian apologetists actually believe in the Big Bang. They think the science is pretty sound and they accept it. I don't necessarily accept it. I think that you can tie your cart too closely to this, because there's a lot of things about the Big Bang that aren't quite as sure as some people think. But anyway, let's have a look at it, because to understand naturalistic scientific opinion, we need to understand a bit about the Big Bang. So the idea is that everything began from a point of massive, huge mass and near zero volume. That's called the singularity. So the idea is that everything around us, all of the planets, all of the gas in the universe, all of the stars and galaxies, that was all contracted or began its life in a single point. So it's just unbelievable. And I guess at that point, the laws of science that we know to apply in our completed universe don't necessarily all hold. And so this zero volume massive mass thing is called the singularity. So it's that which began the universe. So space, which is not nothing, it's not just a vacuum. Space is kind of like a matrix that we don't fully understand, but we believe to be expanding, and the matter in that space is expanding. And of course, time has to do with space and matter as well. And so time began when the universe as we know it began. And so that explosive expansion and even what's considered to be acceleration of the speed of that expansion has continued for up to 17 billion years, according to people who believe in this kind of cosmic evolution. This fellow called Burbridge made this comment. He said, Big Bang cosmology is perhaps as widely believed as has been any theory of the universe, the history of the Western civilization. It rests on many untested and in some cases untestable assumptions. In fact, it's become a bandwagon of thought that reflects faith as much as objective truth. Now, the issue we need to remember here is that the Big Bang, even if God used the Big Bang, there's a number of different models, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But if God used the Big Bang as his mode of creation, it still it still doesn't let atheists off the hook, because they got to explain what banged. How did the Big Bang happen? And this is a problem for atheists. It's this thing that sticks in their throat a little bit. It's like, why is there something and not nothing? What is the cause of this explosion? And when we take the pretty sound way of thinking and say, reality as we know it today teaches us, well, that's good. Reality as we know it today teaches us that you get an explosion, you've got to have something to explode. So this doesn't support atheism. God could have used the Big Bang. He could have used a number of other models. We don't know exactly how he did it. But if he did, it doesn't solve the problem for the atheist, because everyone knows in our experience, and nobody's experienced anything otherwise, that nothing produces nothing. So Stephen Hawking, a great theorist, said, we're not able to make cosmological models without some admixture of ideology. And what he's saying there is that you can't actually make descriptions of the beginning of the universe without putting in some of your beliefs. And so people have tried this description partly to do away with the God concept, but they haven't done away with it. They've just pushed it back a bit to the beyond time, which of course where eternity belongs. My point is their Big Bang model requires that the whole of the universe be homogeneous and that there's no center to the universe. Some evidence, however, suggests the opposite. The universe seems to be rotating around a single axis. Now, one of the reasons people began believing in the Big Bang is Edwin Hubble, and he recognized that that light from distant stars, or stars we assume to be distant, because we never know for sure because we don't know what that light's been through. But light from distant stars appears to be moved towards the redder end of the spectrum, the lower energy end of the spectrum. So you've got in the rainbow, the color spectrums: red, orange, yellow, blue, green, blue, indigo, and violet. So the red end is the lower energy, the longer waves, if you like, and the blue end is the higher energy. Then you've got ultraviolet, which are higher energy still, infrared, which is lower energy. So you've got that spectrum. And if something moves towards the red end of the spectrum, it means that the object producing that light could be moving away. Just like when you see when you're standing by a railway line and a train comes through, and if it's got one of these diesel electric, trains with a horn, and if it's going, okay, like that, blowing its horn, as it goes past you, you'll notice it lowers. So it's towards you, it's, and same with any kind of horn or siren that's coming towards you, going past, moving away. When it's coming towards you, it's compressing the wave, so it's a higher pitch. And when it's going away from you, it's drawing out the wavelengths, so it's a lower pitch. So it's a little bit like redshift, quite a bit like redshift actually. The belief is that because the light source is moving away, it's producing light, which is a lower energy at the red end of the spectrum. What they don't tend to tell you here is that there are some light-bearing bodies in the sky that show blue shift. And often it's these anomalies which warn us that there's something seriously wrong with the theory. So anyway, that's the concept. The other thing that was discovered, it was that in the universe there is energy, and that energy is in the form of microwave radiation. much like the energy produced by your microwave um, cooker. And we have one, we use it usually every day. So that's producing a similar kind of radiation to what's found out there in space. There is what they call these cosmic ripples. And so this is explained as being the results of the Big Bang. Of course, it could be the results of God's creation. It doesn't necessarily mean Big Bang. But so these are the reasons, the main reasons why scientists have latched onto this model as an explanation for the universe. So the other thing is about the Big Bang. The reason I question it is that light from stars can be stretched to the red end by other things, like the motion of stars themselves. Like gravity, if a light beam goes through a strong gravitational force, it can be affected. If the universe is in circular motion rather than expansive motion, that could affect it. If that light interacts with other light on the way, it can result in energy loss. And so there are different things which cast a question mark over this concept of the Big Bang. The other thing about the background radiation, the energy in space, is that could be the result of God's creation. But we also know that certain types of stars or entire galaxies can emit this sort of radiation into space. So it may not be the result of an initial explosion. There are other reasons. There's other evidence used against the Big Bang model, the wrong assumption that the universe is uniform throughout, something called the cosmological constant. The wrong assumption that the universe has no beginning. Excuse me, sorry, no center. And if that's the case, and we don't need to go into details about this, but the missing antimatter, positrons and antiprotons, the missing mass, the theoretical dark matter, the missing neutrinos from solar fusion, things like this that aren't explained adequately by the Big Bang. The evidence that the universe was created for human life, that's called the anthropic principle. We'll look at this a wee bit more. The argument that clouds of hydrogen and helium wouldn't collapse under gravity to produce fusion for suns. And the idea of these hydrogen and helium coming together and producing other elements as they come in. And the missing time due to experiments showing that the solar system cannot be more than thousands of years old if you believe in a young universe model. There are other models. This is my particular one, actually. I quite like this one because I think it lines up with the Bible. In Isaiah 34:4, it says, all the stars of the heavens will be dissolved and the sky rolled up like a scroll. All the starry host will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from the fig tree. And then in Revelation 6:14, talking about the end times, it says the sky receded like a scroll, rolling up. Every mountain and island was removed from its place. So we're talking about something fairly cataclysmic in the end times. And I don't think it's just metaphor. Maybe it's presumably the scroll concept is metaphor. But it could be that that the universe as we know it is more like a scroll. And I understand Einstein deduced that the universe was curved. And a scroll, of course, is curved. So who knows? Those things far out in outer space may well be a lot closer to us than we realize. We're just seeing them through a curved lens. And there are other models. Barry Setterfield and Greg Norman, I believe it is, maybe not Greg, but somebody Norman, have done a lot of research in the area of the speed of light decay model. And that model is based on the fact that since we've been measuring the speed of light since the 1800s, not me personally, it can be shown to be following a decay curve. And if that's the case, it means it's been, even though it's really fast, it's been a lot faster in the past. And that would show that things can go past a lot quicker. That would have quite big implications in the dating of the universe. Then these guys also promote something called the plasma energy model. There's a lot of plasma energy in space, and where you get plasma bands in space, you know like those lights, those plasma things you put your hand on, and it kind of, the plasma energy comes over and is attracted or is affected by your hands. Well, where you get plasma bands crossing, you get star formation, apparently. So the problem with this model, the reason that it's not likely to be very popular, is because it allows for the young Earth biblical model. So there are other models. Don't think that the Big Bang is the only show in town, but it's one that a lot of people have bought into. And a lot of people say, well, you know, how old is the universe? Well, there are some clues that the ancient concept of the universe that some Christians have, and of course most unbelievers have, will not be right. Here's, for example, some research on supernova remnants. Supernovas are exploding suns in space. And we know from physics that a supernova will normally follow a three-part system until it kind of doesn't exist anymore. It's decayed. The first is 300 years, the second is 120,000 years, and the third is 6 million years, and then it's pretty much finished. Now, it's interesting that if the universe is billions of years old, like evolution teaches, like naturalistic opinion teaches, we might expect in our galaxy to see a couple in the first stage, a couple of thousand in the second stage, and about 5,000 in the third stage. If the Earth is around about 7,000 years old, or somewhere around there, we'd expect to see 2 in the first stage and 125 in the second stage, and of course none in the third stage, because the universe is not more than 120,000 years. And so what we actually observe, apparently, is 5 in the first stage, 200 in the second stage, and none in the third stage, which lasts for 6 million years. So where are the missing supernovas in the third stage and in the second stage? So good question. And that's just one anomaly which points to the fact that, hey, maybe we've got something wrong here. Anomalies are very important clues, okay? People who want to push a ideological agenda don't like anomalies, and the anomalies disagree with them. Here is some of the evidence that scientists, generally who are Christians, point to show that the universe may well not be as old as some scientists believe. One is the decaying Earth's magnetic field strength. It's decaying, and the Earth is like a magnet. We need that field strength because it protects us from radiation in space. And if you plot that back on a curve, you don't go back very far as on a decay curve, as far as years are concerned. The amount of helium in the atmosphere is nowhere near enough to allow for a universe of billions of years old of age on Earth. The fact that we have short period comets flying around, we know that they break up every time they orbit the sun. They lose a whole lot of material. The fact that we've still got some is a sign that the universe is not billions of years old. Now, scientists get right around that by postulating that there's a cloud of comet-producing things that kind of fire them or release them into the solar system. And that's called the Oort cloud. Nobody's ever seen it. There's no evidence that it's there as far as I'm concerned. It's just a bit of an intellectual trick to solve the problem that we've got comets, short period comets in our solar system. Then you've got the pressure of oil and oil fields. If that is millions and millions of years old, the pressure is way too high. It slowly dissipates over time. Then we've got the concentrations of chemicals in the oceans. Now, those chemicals are quite strong when you taste the stuff, but it's nowhere near as strong as they would be if we'd had millions of years of the land decay. If you believe in the biblical flood, of course, a lot of the chemicals would have been released during the flood. Salt's the primary one, but there's lots of other stuff in there. And then you've got the filling of deltas, like the Mississippi Delta and other deltas around the world. They're not near full enough to allow for millions of years. And then you've got the rate of the Earth's cooling. Our Earth is got a molten core, as far as we know. And it's way too hot to be billions of years old. So that's some of the reasons. And there are a couple of experts, James Barr, who was a professor of interpretation of Holy Scripture at the University of Oxford. As far as I know, he wasn't a creationist, but he makes the point about the language in Genesis 1:11. Language, which in my understanding is historical narrative. It's not myth. It's not the language of storytelling. It's historical narrative. It's probably, as far as I know, there is no professor of Hebrew or Old Testament at any world-class university who does not believe that the writer, or writers, he puts, of Genesis 1-11 intended to convey to their readers the idea is that A, creation took place in a series of 6 days, which were the same as the days of 24 hours we now experience. B, the figures contained in Genesis genealogies provide, by simple addition, a chronology from the beginning of the world to later stages in the biblical story. And C, Noah's flood was understood to be worldwide and extinguish all human and animal life except for those in the ark. Now, I don't think he believed it, but he recognized that that's what the Bible most clearly seemed to be saying. Excuse me, drinking my cuppa. Feel free to have one yourself. And so that's interesting. Another one is this fellow called Patel T. Pun. Hopefully I've got him here. And he was a professor of biology at Wheaton College. He says, it's apparent the most straightforward understanding of the Genesis record, I'm reading in the white, is that God created heaven and earth in 6 solar days, that man was created in the 6th day. Death and chaos entered the world after the fall of Adam and Eve. That all of the fossils were the result of the catastrophic universal deluge which spared only Noah's family and the animals therewith. Now, not necessarily all the fossils, by the way, Mr. Pun, but certainly some of them, a lot of them. Now, notice a bit I left out because this is the explanatory, but without regard to all the hermeneutical considerations suggested by science. So what he's saying is that we have to interpret the Bible on the basis of modern science. But of course, modern science is changing. Now, the interesting thing is, and I hold a young earth perspective, I think, goodness sake, God can make it in 24 hours. He can make it in 24 hours, 6 slots of 24 hours. It's a piece of cake for God. He can do anything. Okay, let's not say he's lost his power. And when he most clearly seems to say that he did, well, then he did. And when he says Adam and Eve were the parents of all living, which the Bible says, well, Jesus believed that. So who do I believe? Fans of changing science or the Son of God? And Jesus believed in Noah and the flood as well. You can't really understand the flood without an understanding of God's intervention and timing. He may have used an asteroid impact or something similar to trigger the massive breakup of the Earth's crust that caused the universal flood. But you can't really understand it without God's intervention. And that's fine because God shows that he does intervene at times in the history of our planet. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is that you want to try to merge modern science, naturalistic science, which gets rid of God in their thinking. You want to try to merge that with the Bible. And to me, it doesn't work. However, I'm not at war with old earth creationists. They tend to mythologize the flood. And I just think that's really, really dumb. But and they tend to think that Adam and Eve aren't the original parents, and that's really dumb. But the ones that I do strongly disagree with, strongly, are those that hold that God used evolutionary processes, that it all happened by random processes. Maybe God got it going or oversaw it, but that doesn't gel with me. That's not the God that I know. The question arises, well, if we can see starlight from distant sources, and remember that parallax geometry's got its limitations, eh? I mean, we don't really know for sure. In fact, the bottom line is that we don't actually know anything for sure beyond our own solar system where somebody's gone. But let's assume that that there's a galaxy a million light years away. Then that light therefore has been coming from the stars in that galaxy for a million years to get here on Earth. So how do you explain that if you're saying the universe isn't a million years old? And one of the ways that it can be explained, and we've already talked about the speed of light decay. If the light was going a lot faster, it can travel here a lot quicker. But one of the interesting ways is to apply Einstein's general theory of relativity. So here's how it goes. We know that matter, that space is a matrix of something, and matter distorts it. It produces a gravitational force around itself that distorts space. And inside that depression, physical processes and time slow down. That's applying Einstein's relativity, which is pretty much a firmly established principle in science. Now, when the universe was much smaller, that distortion was way bigger. So on Earth, time was slower, but on the edge of the visible universe, billions of years of physical processes occurred. Thus, the most distant starlight could easily traverse the distance to Earth in just a few days. So that you might be thinking, whoa. Well, that's the reality of relativity. And Dr. Russell Humphreys has made that point, and as far as I know, he's not been successfully refuted. When we're thinking about the origin of the universe, and one of the areas of interest is the fact that our universe seems to be customized, particularly our solar system, customized for human life. And this is an evidence of intelligence, of course. So just to give ourselves a bit of a wow effect, let's imagine that let's change the scale. So imagine that 1,000,000 kilometers is 1 centimeter. Okay, so what would the universe look like? Well, the sun would be the size of a grape, and the Earth would be the size of a very small grain of sand, about 1.5 meters away. Jupiter would be the size of a tiny pebble, and that would be 8 meters away. Pluto, that would be a speck of dust, about 59 meters away. The nearest star, to our sun, Alpha Centauri, which is in the Southern Cross pointers, would be 410 kilometers away. That's how big the galaxy is, and that's how far away stuff is, but it can still have an influence. And so we've got a solar system which is balanced. The sun is the right distance from the Earth. If it's closer, we'd fry. If it was further back, we'd freeze. We've got the right size moon. It doesn't destabilize the Earth too much as it goes around. We know it pulls the water to it. That's why we have tides. We know it slightly changes the shape of the Earth as it goes around. Too big a moon, there'd be a lot more volcanic and earthquake type activity. But our moon's okay. And it's not big enough to hold an atmosphere, doesn't have enough gravity for that. We've only got one moon, so there's not the confusion. And we've got the right spin speed, 24 hours, so we don't get too cold in one place, we don't get too hot in one place. We've got the right angle, so we get seasons, and we've got the right size and weight of the Earth. It's big enough to have enough gravity to hold an atmosphere. It's very important to us. There are other things. We've got the right substance in the ozone layer to protect us from all of that radiation from outer space. We've got the right gases in the atmosphere, about 20% oxygen. We can handle it a bit higher. And in the past, it may well have been higher, but some evidence for that. But too high, of course, and things combust too quickly, too easily. Nitrogen, a very, very stable element, which makes up most of the 80% of our air, but we've got a wee bit of carbon dioxide and other things as well. And then we've got the Earth's magnetic field. As I said, it's like a magnet, and that protects us from radiation from space. And we've got the right amount of water on the planet. I understand there's about 10 times as much under the surface as there is on the surface. And water is just the right substance. It increases in size as it gets colder, and therefore it floats and it doesn't sink. So the oceans never freeze from the bottom up. They freeze from the top down and can unfreeze when things warm up. Fish appreciate that, by the way. Well, they may not know they appreciate it, but it works for them. Then we've got a great big vacuum cleaner, and I wonder if you can spot the mistake. We've got a great big vacuum cleaner near us, and it's actually not Saturn, although Saturn's not too far away, but Jupiter is the hero. And Jupiter, we know that if you ever look at the moon and the Earth, we've been pummeled by various lumps of stuff from space and still continue to have this stuff coming in. But the biggies, the real baddies, they tend to get sucked away to the bigger planet, Jupiter, and destroyed in them like a great big vacuum cleaner. And that helps Earth to survive. So I hope you appreciate Jupiter. Okay, now we'll ask the question, what does the Bible say about the origin of life on Earth? And that's going to move us on to the area of biology. So I think I'll stop and take a break here, and we'll look at this area of evolution in the next session. So thank you, and God bless you, and we'll see when you tune in to the next one. See you soon.